Today I'm going to be talking about the early warning signs that you could be heading for a flare and what to look out for, and what to keep an eye on that's telling you that your body's inbound for a bad time. My name's Jacob and I've been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis for over 10 years. And over that time, I've had many flares. So I've got very accustomed with the early warning signs that my body is not in the right state and heading for a flare state. So let's get into it. So the first warning sign that I've noticed when I'm heading for a flare, and I like to call it unnatural fatigue, and I can't spell. Unnatural fatigue. So what do I mean by unnatural fatigue? Well, when I've had a day where I just feel weirdly tired and I can't really pinpoint why, and I always seem to forget that this is a flare sign, but there might be a day where I just feel like I can't do anything. I feel so tired and I don't have the motivation to do the things that I usually do. That's when I would say that you're experiencing unnatural fatigue. And when I've experienced this, I really feel like I can't do anything. And the next day, I tend to suddenly have blood. And I'll sit there and beat myself up and be like, why didn't I see this coming? I've had this so many times where unnatural fatigue has led to blood. And I could have had an early warning, I've had the early warning sign. I could have taken action. I could have phoned my healthcare specialist and been like, I think I'm going to flare. I could have taken some medications. Maybe I've got some left over from my previous flare. I could just start taking prednisolone. Not that I am saying to just start taking steroids, but I do feel that this is for me anyway, one of the biggest indicators that I'm inbound for a flare. So if you have had those days where you feel like you're far too fatigued, just think about that. Could be your body's giving you the early warning sign that you're heading for a flare. The next early warning sign is mucus. And if you don't know what mucus is, it's like someone spat in the toilet bowl, but it's come out of your bum. And what even is mucus anyway? So when you're experiencing mucus, imagine this is your bowel. This is the inside of your bowel. Let's get the red pen out here. And you've got maybe an ulcer in there or a bit that's inflamed. This is inflamed here. So typically, your body, I'll do it in green, your body uses mucus to lubricate the sides of your bowel. So here is some mucus and it's lubricated. And this region here, where you're starting to see some inflammation, is producing more mucus. So this will pass. This mucus comes out and you see it in your stool. And that means, it could potentially mean, that you are actually about to flare. And, within a few days, this could then ulcerate and turn into, it's now bleeding. So seeing that mucus in your stool is an early warning sign that you're starting to flare. And that's why whenever I've actually talked to my healthcare specialist, my specialist nurse, she usually asks me, have you seen any mucus lately? Because it's a really great indication that you might be about to flare. Now, mucus doesn't always mean that you are about to flare, because we all sort of pass mucus naturally anyway. But if you're passing an unnatural, not an unnatural, but a large amount of mucus in your stool, then that could be an indication that you're heading for a flare. So it's a really good idea to keep an eye on that. Just have a look down in the bowl when you pass, just keep an eye on things. Is everything okay? If there's a lot of mucus, maybe you should bring it up. Right, so we've talked about mucus. The next way that I feel like a flare might be coming is when you suddenly feel very sad and you can't really pinpoint why. You might even feel depressed. But most likely you're just feeling very, very sad and there's no real reason, there's nothing to connect to that you're actually feeling sad. Why are you feeling sad? I have no idea. Well, if you're sad and there's a big ass question mark next to it, then just maybe it could be there's something going wrong with your gut. Because the gut is very linked with the mind. Let's say this is your gut, this is your brain. These two are very linked. And if something's going wrong here, let's get the old red pen out. If something's going wrong here, there's some ulcers forming, then the brain is going to start saying, there's something going wrong here. And that's why I always think that when I feel unnaturally sad, there's a big question mark, it could be a sign of a flare. And oftentimes on those days where I felt randomly sad, intensely sad, the next day I've actually started to see blood in my stool. And then I'll make the connection and be like, that's why I felt sad. My gut was in disrepair and I needed to start addressing a flare. And that's what was going on. I wasn't just sad for no reason. I was genuinely sad as a sign that my body needs to heal. Now, the next warning sign, we've got it on the board already, is blood. And you might be thinking, well, that's really obvious. That's obvious I'm flaring. But I tell you what, I don't know if this is you as well, but there have been times when I see the blood and I'll think, oh, hopefully I'll pass in a few days. I will wait. I decide to wait instead of doing anything about it. I think maybe it'll pass in a week. And then a week goes by and it hasn't passed. Maybe it'll pass in 2 weeks. 2 weeks go by. You're still bleeding. Oh, and lo and behold, the bleeding has now got worse. So when you see blood, it's time to take action. It's time to talk to your healthcare specialist. It's time to get on a countermeasure, a medication, whatever it is, time to get on it. Because too often have I thought I can take matters into my own hands and wait for this to pass. And it doesn't. It really doesn't. This whiteboard's getting messy. Even if it's just hemorrhoids, I like to talk to my healthcare specialist and just say, oh, I've had some blood pass. What can we do about this? I'll say, if I think it's just hemorrhoids, I'll say so. That's where communication is very important. We're just going to make a note of this on here. Communication. Very important that you keep open communication at all times. Even if you just see the smallest bit of blood, there's a small bit of blood for you. And you might attribute it to, this is going to challenge my spelling, hemorrhoids. It might not be hemorrhoids, and you might need to get on medications to tackle it. So it's best that you keep that open communication. And if the blood dries up, let's say dries up next day, gone. It probably was hemorrhoids, but at least you told your specialist. And the specialist will often say, right, so you've seen some blood, it's time for a blood test, blood and stool test. And this will give you a great window, a great look into the health of your gut, because you can see your inflammation levels in these tests. That's the great thing about those tests, because it gives you the real picture, what's actually going on inside of you, the picture that you can't tell just by looking. So an early warning sign in that case would be an elevation of your inflammation levels in those tests. Sometimes if you've got some forms lying around, you can actually just take them, well, in the UK anyway, you can take them and get a test done. Like I've got a stool sample pot upstairs and I've got some spare blood forms. So if I wanted to book myself in to do a test, well, I'd just fill up the pot and take it to the hospital and I can test it. Not everyone's going to have that, but if you've got a nice healthcare provider, a nice nurse, she might slip you a few extra blood forms so you can keep an eye on those things. So another early warning sign could be pain. Are you getting cramps? Are you getting more cramps? Are these going up? Because you might get cramps. I still get cramps now and I'm not flaring, but are cramps becoming more frequent? Are you literally getting hunched over in pain? Well, that could be an indication that something's going wrong. Maybe you haven't seen mucus yet, but you've seen an increase in pain. So this could be another reason. Just tell your healthcare specialist, I've been experiencing more pain and cramps lately. What can I do about this? And then they can keep an eye on you. They might get that blood test in early before anything happens. And that's one of the keys. It's just going back to communication. I'll write it again because it's so important. And pain, it doesn't always mean that you're flaring. It might just be you had a meal and it's not passing through as quickly as it should, or you're very gassy. Not necessarily a sign that you're flaring, but it's worth keeping an eye on. And if it does consistently, pain is consistently rising, then that is something you definitely want to keep an eye on, because increased pain, it could be a sign of ulcers forming, whatever it may be, could be a sign that things are not going the way that they should be. So how can we actually mitigate these things? We've talked about the early warning signs, but how can we mitigate them? Well, it's just the tried and tested methods of getting good sleep, getting exercise, eating the right sort of foods, having a community, and reducing your stress. All of these things work in conjunction to stop you from flaring. Oh, and of course, medication. We can't forget medication. There are a lot of people that will try and push herbal remedies on you and tell you how medications aren't going to help you. Well, I'm here to tell you that they are indeed wrong. Yes, there is a time and a place for that sort of thing, but medication in particular is really the one thing that's going to bring you out of a flare. And if you are in a flare, you need to get out of that as fast as possible. And the best way to do that is with medication. At the same time, it's going to sound like a big challenge, but at the same time, all of this needs to be worked on in conjunction with each other. And if you're able to slowly improve this, you will be less likely to flare. So those are the ways I wanted to just share with you in case you are worried or you don't know. Maybe this is all new to you and you're a bit scared. You've no idea what's going on. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I can address them and answer those questions for you. Thanks for watching.